Hi, welcome to Actualol. These are the board games I've been playing lately. The Estates is an auction game where you're all collaboratively building this housing estate with these wooden blocks, putting roofs on them, and you're trying to make the most money. The way it works is that on your turn, you pick something to be auctioned off. So you could pick one of these blocks, the person to my left would bid, everyone else would bid. I could either take the money, the highest bid, or I could pay the highest bid. I don't have to raise it. I can give the highest bid, but I'm giving it to the person who made that bid. So it's a very interesting auction dynamic because you want to be bidding high because then you might be making money off of other people when you didn't even necessarily want the thing. So how high can you bid so that you might actually be the highest bid, then get paid that money by the person who is running the auction. So if I was to win, I was to pay the highest bid for this purple block, I would decide which street it goes on, and then I would get this card which represents that I now control purple. So I have a vested interest in purple, nobody else will score from purple. If in a future round I was to get a roof, or somebody was to place a roof on here, that would be great for me because then I've got the 4 points that are on the block plus the value of the roof. That is 9 points. But if somebody was to take a lower number of another color and put it on top, that is no longer my building. It's always about the color that's at the top. And so the yellow player has now effectively stolen those points from me. And if they were to then put this roof on there, then they would have 4 plus 1 plus this 5. So they've got 10 points out of that. So getting down early is risky because people can go on top of you and then just steal those points. But sometimes that's a good thing because at the end of the game ends when 2 of the streets are finished. So you've got 1, 2, 3 streets and they generally finish if they get to this river. So if you've got a bunch of blocks like this and then there are roofs on all of them like this, that is a completed street. You have 2 of those, the game ends. But if you're scoring points from an unfinished street at the end of the game, you're going to get minus points for them. And this is where the game gets really fierce and quite cutthroat. What makes the game even more interesting is a few other things that you can auction off beyond just blocks and roofs. So you've got these things here, and these extend the region of a street. So if I was to auction off this, it's got 3 lines on it. It's basically saying that I could extend a street by 3. I could place this here, and now this street is much longer. So I might be doing that because I really don't want this street to finish because I'm not involved in it. I want to screw over all the other players that are involved in this street because they're going to get loads of minus points. Then I want to quickly finish off the other 2 streets because I've got loads of points in them. One of the things that you'll find with this game is that every auction feels so important, but yet by the end of the game, some of those auctions at the start don't count for a whole lot because so much has changed since then. These street extenders have such a massive impact on that end of the game, also about the placement of roofs, that it's so hard to know when to bid big on things. That money is constantly changing hands. You've got to make sure you're rich at the right times. I mean, this game, you can have massively different amount of points at the end of the game because of just those last few turns. And I think that some people find that really frustrating, that it's all about the interaction, how those auctions go. This isn't a sort of Euro game where you can do your own thing and not worry about other stuff and you'll be safe. You are not safe. People will definitely be trying to tank your points if you're the one in the lead, but they're also doing it for their benefit because they're trying to win. I think it's brilliant. I think the dynamic is so much fun because you're always invested. Everything is important to you because you don't want anyone to prosper better than you. You wish that you could bid on everything. I really like what they've done with the estates. They've taken an older game, given it a completely new theme, but I really enjoy the artwork and the colourful wooden blocks. It's such a different auction game from anything else I've played. I don't think it's going to be for everyone because you have to be just kind of ready to be screwed on points for things to kind of really move around. It can be hard to keep track of, but I also have found almost the cleverest people at the table being the ones that have bid the right amounts at the right time, and they've absolutely smashed the other players. So I don't think it's a game that has no skill. It's not all just like random chance, but it is very player dependent. I've had a blast with it. I think it's a really fascinating auction game. My only downside really is just that it goes on a bit long. It lasts about an hour and a half, and for a game that sort of has so many highs and lows, I just would prefer it was more like 45 minutes to an hour. But yeah, if you're looking for an interesting, different auction game and you like the idea of always being involved in what can end up feeling quite an insane ride, check out The Estates. The Quacks of Quedlinburg is an interesting push your luck game. This is from designer Wolfgang Warsch, who designed The Mind, which is one of my favourite games of last year. And this won the Kennerspiel des Jahres of 2018, which in English it says is the Connoisseur's Game of the Year. So this is a very fated game, and I wanted to check it out. The way it works is that you are drawing things from a bag, and you are trying to build a potion, and you are pushing your luck, trying to draw out tokens and not go bust. So everyone plays at the same time in this game, which means that there's never really much downtime. You draw out a token and you place it in your pot, and it'll have a number on it. So this had a 2 on it, so I place it. I've sort of got 2 points in my pot. Then I've got a 3, but that one's white. That's not so good for me. I'll explain why. Then I've got a 2, and I'm building up. Things are going into my pot. And at the end of the round, well, I will stop at some point and decide that's enough. I don't want to push my luck any further. And I will get spending points from that allow me to then buy better tokens to improve my bag for the next round. And I will also get some victory points, which will obviously help me win the game. The way I go bust is if I draw out these white tokens that equal to over 7. If you go bust, you either don't get spending points or you don't get victory points, whereas normally you would get both, and you can decide which. So earlier on in the game, you would tend to not take the victory points because you really want to build up your bag. It's very simple gameplay-wise. You are just deciding how long to push your luck for, and of course there is some luck involved. If you don't like games with too much luck, then you might struggle with this one. But there's some thinkiness to it as well, because at the end of the round, you'll decide how to spend your points, and each of these tokens works in a different way. So the white tokens don't really do much except make you go bust. But then you've got all these other colors that have different rules. And what's interesting about this as well is that these rules can change every time you play. It can be a slightly different system. So that's really cool. So for example, these red chips, they will move further. They will get me more points if I had a red chip, depending on how many pumpkins, orange ones, I already have in my pot. So if I've got a pumpkin that's down already, this chip's going to move up. I'm going to get more points. I'm going to fill up my pot even more. These blue ones here, this allows me to draw a chip out of my bag, but I don't have to place it. So if I draw a white one, which are the bad ones, I could put it back in. There's also a mechanism for encouraging you to push further than other players, because you get to roll the bonus die at the end of the round if you're the person that filled up your pot the most. I really like the immediacy of this game, and there's just push your luck games I tend to find really fun, pulling out these tokens, just very simple, but you're always just hoping for the right thing. And it gives you some depth in what the tokens do. Do you want to spend all your money on these really good tokens? If you draw this is 4 points. It's really going to fill up your pot. Or do you want lots of cheaper tokens because you just want to bulk out your bag and not be as likely to draw a white token out? So plenty to think about, and yet such a simple idea. The downside to it, I think, is just that it's not that interactive between the players. You are doing your own thing. You're doing it at the same time, so you're never slowed down by other players. But you're not that focused on what they're doing. It's very much about your board. Everyone's got their own potion board. And you don't really care what they're doing other than they're maybe getting more points than you. And it can just feel a little bit repetitive, just always going into that bag, playing 9 rounds. But I think it's a completely different game to anything else, and I totally get why it won that award. I think it's really cool. That is Quacks of Quedlinburg. The Martian Investigations is a mystery game in the vein of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. This is self-published by Robin David, who designed Tag City and Movable Type, which I've talked about in previous videos. And so the gist of this is you're trying to solve a crime, just like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, where you read an introduction. Basically in this, there have been 2 murders that have taken place, and you are a detective that have been sent in to this settlement on Mars, where they're obviously trying to terraform Mars. And you have to go around and meet with witnesses and try and collect evidence and try and solve who killed these people and why they did it. So I don't want to spoil too much about it, but the backstory is interesting with this. It's in a time where humans have lived on Mars for a while, and they are trying to terraform it. They are excavating for minerals. So there's a bit of a power dynamic between the mining companies and the security companies that are sort of protecting those interests. And then you've got the scientists who are doing like archaeological digs on the planet, and they're finding all this wonderful stuff, but they're sort of not necessarily getting along with the mining companies. Basically, you've got a map at the back here which shows the settlement and the different locations you can visit. Just like in Sherlock Holmes, you've got your directory here, which is all the different names you can visit. And then when you look up a name, you would then turn to the right section in the rest of the book. And so I like that it's all contained into one book. We took this on holiday, and it was just great because this is it. You know, you don't have to bring the newspaper and all the other aspects of Sherlock Holmes, which is still not very much, but I like that it was this nice self-contained thing. And really, this comes down to whether the mystery was good, whether it was fun to solve, and it was. So without spoiling it, I think that it does an interesting job of setting the scene, putting you into this new world, explaining almost like the politics and the environment that you're in, and you're new to it as your character, and then meeting with the different people. They all had a certain amount of character and motives, and it felt like a world, just like when you play a Sherlock Holmes game. So if you like the Sherlock Holmes mysteries and you'd be interested in trying one on Mars, then I absolutely would recommend the Martian Investigations, because it's just more of that same fun. And who doesn't want that, because these types of games are brilliant. So if you'd like to try it, I believe you could probably get a print and play, and you might be able to get actually buy this from Robin's website. His name is Robin David, and his website is www.robin-david.com, and I'll put a link below. So that is the Martian Investigations. Lotsa is an expansion for K2, which is a mountain climbing game that I really love. If you want to see a full review of that, I would recommend the Shut Up and Sit Down review they did years ago. It's great. And I'll give you a quick overview of that game. Basically, in K2, you are trying to climb a mountain. You have 2 climbers, and you're trying to keep them alive. They have this acclimatization level, which is basically how cold they are getting. And you have to climb the mountain and balance your resources. You have these cards that you're playing that have movement points or acclimatization points on them. And you are having to decide when to play your good cards and when to risk it and move further up the mountain. There's a real push your luck aspect to it. And your climbers can die, and then you're going to lose points. So it's about how far do you think you can safely get, and can you get back down? There's interesting blocking ideas in it, because as you get further towards the peak, there are smaller spaces, so not so many climbers can be on those spots. And you might be able to just not get through to where you need to, and you can actually stop people from getting back to their tent or surviving because you're in the way. Really interesting interactive game that works with a very simple system of just playing these cards, and I love it. I think it's a really cool game, K2. So I was definitely excited to try an expansion for it. And what Lotsa adds is a new board. So this is a peak, I believe it's on the way to Everest, and this is a double-sided board, And what's interesting about this side is that it's split up into west, center, and east. And so there is different weather for the different parts of the mountain. So in the normal game, you have weather that will affect you based on your altitude, and you really have to plan ahead. You can see the weather that's coming. Can you survive it? In this one, you can see which side of the mountain it will be on. So for example, here you've got west, you'll lose 1 acclimatization point. East, you'll lose 1. But in the middle, you'll lose 2. So you really don't want to be in the middle when this weather comes around. And so I really like that you can move to different parts of the mountain in this. And one of the ways you can do that is another cool mechanism they added. It gives you these 2 tokens that allow you to create a new route that isn't printed on the board. So I could play this here and using normal movement rules, move to this spot. It's not completely overpowered. You can't just climb all the way up the mountain with it, but it allows you to make really interesting decisions. You can only use it once, and it's vital. There'll be so many times that you would be desperate to be able to use it again. So I love that little addition. I think it makes the game so interesting. And then combined with the west, center, east, knowing that, okay, I might start on the east, but move towards the center as I go on, or go up on the east, but come back down on the west because the weather's better on that side. One of the things that it adds is that you can now look at 2 weather tiles at the start of the game and pick one that's going to be in the game. So you have a bit of an understanding about what the weather will be later on in the game. That's really cool. And I really love that it's added landslides, which are a new type of weather. So if a landslide happens in your region, you take 2 acclimatization point hit, but you also get shifted down the mountain by 1 space. So I love that it's thematic and yet really simple. And that's what the original K2 was so great at. I think this expansion, what I love about it is that it doesn't completely reinvent the game. I've played the game Mount Everest, which is same designer, same artwork, same idea, and it overcomplicated what I loved about K2. What this does is it just gives you a few twists, makes it interesting if you love the game, you've played it a lot. I played this with newbies and they just picked it up fine. There was nothing about the expansion that really made the game overcomplicated. So it sticks to that original formula of thematic ideas that make for really interesting, interactive, exciting gameplay. And yeah, I would recommend it. If you like K2, then Lotsa is a great expansion to own for it. This is the Quest for El Dorado, and I wanted to talk about its expansion Heroes and Hexes. I recommended this in my Christmas gifts video of last year. It's a really interesting deck builder designed by Rainer Knizia, which is a race game. And I'll talk about the base game very simply. You will be playing cards like a deck builder that correspond to the spots on the board. So this, imagine this is my adventurer here. To be able to move to through a green forest, I could play a green card here. This one has a number 2 on it, so I could move 1, 2 because there are only 1 symbols on both of these hexes. So I'm trying to move through the map and race to get to El Dorado. The board would normally be a lot bigger than this. And my opponents are also around the same time, and you can get in each other's way because you can't share spaces, and you're using your cards. And so just like if you've ever played Clank, there's that frustrating thing of not getting the cards you need because you only get 4 cards a turn in this game. It might not come up with the color that you need. Oh, I really wanted a yellow card this round, and oh, I got one, but it didn't have enough numbers on it. So you're trying to build your deck to be able to improve your ability to race through this forest and swim through these areas to get to El Dorado. And so there's a big market of cards that you can buy. And so one of the things you can do on your turn, instead of using your cards to move, is to buy better cards, which improves your deck, which will speed you up. So there's a really interesting balance in the base game of trying to understand how much time do I spend and how much resources do I spend just improving my deck so I'm amazing versus just actually trying to get to the end. What the Hero and Hexes expansion adds is a few different things. So you get this special card at the start of the game that goes in your deck, which gives you an animal that is basically like a companion. So you've got a llama and a cow and an elephant and a parrot, and they are going to be good for a certain thing. So it makes your starting deck very slightly asymmetrical. You can also choose to, I guess, kill the animal, which gives you an even greater benefit, but allows you to take this card out of your deck. So very simple idea that, but a nice little addition. One of the things that you can pick up along the way is you can go to the tavern and you can recruit a proper companion, a human companion. These are really powerful cards, but you have to kind of go out of your way to get it. These are all based on characters from TV and books and films, and they're named very slightly differently. So instead of Amelia Earhart, you've got Amelia Lockhart. And instead of Crocodile Dundee, you've got Christopher Dundee. And instead of Katniss Everdeen, you've got Gertrude Everdeen. And so all of their little powers has a slight nod to their characters, which is cute. One of the really cool things that I love about this expansion is these curses that you can get. So if you walk onto one of these purple spots, in fact, the only way to walk onto these purple spots is to take a curse. And these are these circular discs, and they are bad. Everything they do is bad, but it's randomized. It might not be that bad. So sometimes you will just have to spend some cards to get rid of this token before you can do anything else. Whereas other times it might move the other characters forward. You have to make the decision, is it worth moving onto this spot and taking those curses, or should I maybe try and take a longer route round? Well, actually what I really like about this map tile is that you have to take some curses. But there's also these doorways. If I went here, I have to take 2 curses, but it allows me to move straight to here where I take another curse, but then I've skipped a whole part of the map. So I'm really ahead, but I'm blighted by all these curses. There is definitely luck here in terms of the curses you get. How bad will they be for your current situation? Sometimes they're not so bad. Sometimes they can really slow you down. I just like that they've added this push your luck idea to it. Some players will just avoid them entirely. Other players will really go for it. The other thing that the game has added is more of these caves. So in the original game, there was a variant you could play with where you added these caves, and basically if you end up by one of these caves, you get this tile, and then you can use this later on. So this one allows you to just spend it for 2 coins, which will allow you to help you buy cards. What I like about all of the modules really is it just gives you a little bit more to think about. I don't think it slows the game down at all, but it might give you a reason to veer off. Maybe you want to go towards the cave because now you're going to get something for free. Maybe you want to go towards these curses and take that shortcut. You want to go and pick up the tavern. One of the really bad curses actually is giving you these cards that then go in your deck. And so you will then draw this card and it will be completely useless to you. And so you've just got less options on that turn. So trying to get rid of those cards is really interesting. And just like in the base game, there is interesting thought put towards thinning your deck. I won this game the last time I played it by just getting a really good but really lean deck that I was just cycling through and making great strides. So loads of depth, just as you'd imagine with a Reiner Knizia game, but absolutely a game that almost anyone could play. And I think it really comes down to this. If you like Quest for El Dorado, then I would recommend this. As long as you can handle the luck factor that you might get with the curses, I think it makes for a more exciting experience. I'm not saying it's a must-have, but I think it adds some really cool things. So that is the Quest for El Dorado and the new expansion, Heroes and Hexes. Tokyo Highway is an interesting dexterity puzzle game. On the face of it, it looks very much just like a dexterity game in that you're placing these wooden sort of lollipop sticks and you're trying to build up this 3D thing. But actually the way you win the game, the way you get points, is by trying to puzzle out how you can build your rows. So you start off, this is a 2-player game, you've got this green car here and the orange car here. They've got their starting ramp that then leads into a highway. So the orange one goes here, 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 and the green one goes here, 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 here. And every turn you take it in turns to place a road. So if orange was to take their turn, doesn't touch, they would actually get to place a car on there. They got a point. The object of the game is to try and place all of your cars by the end of the game. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to build roads that either go over another player's road or under. And so there's this interesting puzzling of how high do you go and which direction, and it becomes this very spatial but almost logistical thing. You do feel like you're having to work out how road networks work, and because if you sort of go all the way over here, then how are you going to come back? And as you can see, it's a really interesting game to look at. It's definitely got real table presence. It's almost got this meditative puzzle thing about it. It isn't like your average dexterity game. It's not a game that is pushing so much to have these big failures and these big moments. It's very much leaning towards that puzzle and how do you work out the best way to get points. You can play it with 2, 3, or 4 players, and they introduce some extra elements, and you'll obviously end up with a massive grid system of roads with 4 players. My reaction to it is simply just that I was hoping it was more of a dexterity challenge with that fun, that immediate fun of dexterity games like Men at Work, Catch the Moon, where you're just trying to perfectly balance something and it all collapses. And this is much more about the thinkiness of the puzzle and that spatial challenge. And I think that will be for a lot of people. I don't find it to be that fun. And so really that's the experience I had with Tokyo Highway. Say What is a party game where you're trying to guess what your other players think about stuff. I tend to really like these types of social games where you're trying to understand your friends and guess what you know about them. And the way this one works is that 5 cards are played out. Somebody is effectively in the hotspot for that turn. So let's say that I am having to decide how I would rank these 5 things. And I can decide how to interpret them how I like, really, but you're really just ranking them in terms of importance. So you've got tradition, lights, blankets, personal hygiene, politics. And so I would take these cards numbered 1 to 5, and I would put number 1 in front of one of them. Then everyone else is voting on what they think, and they are putting them out like this. Then I reveal, and it turned out that I cared the most about personal hygiene, then politics, then lights, and the other players would reveal those, and they would get a point. They would move along the board for the ones that they got right, and then if you got the most right, you would get an extra point if you know your friend the best. And I think that this game is a really simple concept that just works to create conversation. I've had a lot of laughs with it where you sometimes are getting to rank quite weird and specific things. And I think that's almost its positive and its negative, because sometimes it can really create some interesting discussions about ranking quite arbitrary things or concepts or objects, and other times it just can be a little bit of a dud. So for example, if I was again the person in the hotspot and I was asked to rank chocolate, exercise, sense of humour, horoscopes and motorcycles, well, pretty much anyone that knew me would know that I don't care anything about motorcycles, horoscopes or exercise, and I do really care about sense of humour and chocolate. And so you can occasionally get around like that where it feels a little bit moot. Of course, you have to decide maybe, okay, which is more important, sense of humour or chocolate, and the ranking of these things. But it doesn't lend itself quite so much to great discussion, because by the end of it, you haven't really learned anything about me. There wasn't some big surprise. Oh, wow, I really love horoscopes. I didn't know that about you, Jon. But I guess that will depend who you play it with. This game could be great as a team building thing, or just an icebreaker. It creates discussion, and that's what I first liked about it. And from my point of view, I played a game called I My Favorite Things recently, and that has kind of replaced this style of game for me, because it still has that discussion about what your friends are into, but it has a bit more, you create your own decks, and it just helps you be a bit more group specific. I can recommend this game if you are looking for something super simple that you could play with elderly relatives and kids. If you were in some kind of social group or community group where you wanted to get to know people, I think it'd be great for that. But as a gamer and someone that plays a lot of party games, it just doesn't quite hit the spot to be... I would like it to be a bit more consistently hilarious, and it doesn't quite do that for me. That is Say What. Those are the board games I've been playing lately. I'll put links to where you can buy them in the description below. I'm Jon Purkis. Thanks for watching.